Welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And this week, I'm upstairs from the great man himself, the wizard of the magic carpet, Ali. I'm sitting in Marrakesh in Riyadh Star, where we will all meet very soon. But tonight is not about my travels, interesting though they are to me, they are about the great, the fantastic, the phenomenal, the extraordinary Baboon. Obviously, over to you.
All right. Thank you, John Rowe, for that very, very, very exciting and exemplary introduction. I still think your name sounds like the secret identity of a superhero. So I might call you Marrakesh Man. But anyhow, do what you have to do. We'll see you shortly. All right. So I have a whole lot of stories, and it's all Louis's fault, but I have a whole lot of stories in my head. But Louis may have to leave us early because he has swim today. So I'm doing a variation of an old Ethiopian story. And in the story, the young man's name, well, he has a lot of different names in the story, depending on what version you're talking about. But his name may be Alamanu, or his name may be Ara. He has a lot of different names, but today, in this story, the young man in question, his name is Louis. So this story, let me see if I can do this. This story took place a long time ago. I could have actually held that longer, but hey, that would be showing off. So this story is about a young shepherd boy in Ethiopia, and the different variations of the story has him in different cities. So I'm just going to say that he's in the countryside in Ethiopia, and part of his job was to herd the sheep, and that's what he did. He would herd the sheep, and in some stories he herds goats, but he would herd the sheep up into the upper parts of the mountain where it can get cold and windy. And he had a flute, and he would play the flute if he could find a big rock to hide behind so that the wind didn't chill him to the bones. He'd play his flute, and believe it or not, his flock would listen. And he'd play the flute, and then at the end of the day, he had to take the sheep back down. He had a very rugged, very tough, very challenging life. And just when you think it couldn't get any rougher or any tougher, sickness went through his village, and he lost his parents. Now, his uncle stepped in for a moment, but alas, his uncle succumbed to the illness as well. And so Louis, having no family left, remembered, oh yes, he did have family. He had a sister. Louis, you got a sister. He had a sister who lived in a big city that was about a day's walk away from where he was. So Louis packed up his meager belongings, got himself some cheese, probably goat cheese, and got himself a skin, which is like a flask, only it's made out of leather and had water in it. And he took off to walk toward where his sister worked as a cook in a very rich man's house. And he walked, and he walked, and he walked, and he walked. Hey, Louis, what did he do? He walked, that's right. He walked. All right. And so at last, he arrived at the very rich man's house. But before he could even get to the door, his sister flew out of the house, picked him up, and gave him a great big hug. She was so happy to see her little brother, her younger brother, and she just hugged him and hugged him and hugged him and hugged him. Pretty much like family members hug each other when they haven't seen each other in a while. And after a while, she said, oh, you must come into the kitchen. Let me feed you. And so he went to the kitchen, and she fixed him a meal. She said, now, the master of the house, when he's in a good mood, he's in a good mood, but when he's not, he's not. But I'm going to ask him if he will give you a job herding his cattle. Now, herd, not as in to listen, but as in to direct, to control, and keep look over. So he would herd the cattle. And so the very rich man said, but of course. And so Louis got a job herding the rich man's cattle. So he would set out in the morning and take them out to graze. And then in the evening, after a long day, he'd bring them back in and they would put in their corral. Now, the rich man had a habit of going to town because he could. And he usually rode a mule, and behind him would be someone with a tall umbrella to cover the rich man in the hot, hot sun. And behind the man with the umbrella would be 7 servants. And then way in the back behind the 7 servants would be a boy with a fly switch, you know, to get rid of the flies. But I'm not going to call him Lord of the Flies. That's an entirely different story. So one day, the rich man came back. He was not in a good mood. How dare they insult me? I am master of my own house. I am master of my house. How dare they insult me in the village? I will not have it. I will not have it. I will not have it. Louis' sister pulled him aside and said, you better stay in the kitchen with me. The master is not in a good mood. Are they going to insult me? Am I not as strong as a lion? None of the servants around him said a word. They dare to insult me? Am I not the smartest person in the region? No one said anything. Why, once I became lost in a cold mountains at night, but I leaned against my mule until morning, and miraculously I survived to tell it. But no one said anything. Then he looked up from his food and he said to the servants, tell me, have you ever heard of anyone else as strong or as brave? Now, Louis was new to the ways of the rich man's house, and no one else spoke up. And he said, well, many times when I was watching my uncle's sheep, I too stayed in the cold air of the mountains throughout the night with only a thin cloak to protect me from the cold. The rich man almost choked on his food. Are you trying to make me even angrier? Oh, no, master. No. I speak the truth. I'm not trying to insult you. I just speak the truth. I've stayed in the mountains in the cold of night with only a cloak to keep me warm. Well, we'll see if you're telling the truth or if you're lying. If you speak the truth, I will give you 4 cows and I will give you a pouch full of money. But if you're lying to me, I will banish you and your sister from this house instantly. But master, I'm only telling the truth. We shall see. You are going to go up in the mountains tonight with only your shimmer, which is like a cloak. And we'll see if you survive the night. Now off with you. Now the rich man just knew he was done with his foolish servant. How dare he question him? How dare he say he was as brave as he was? He was a rich man. And so Louis went off into the mountains with only his cloak, a very thin cloak. And he went up in the mountains. And as it is in the ways of mountains, the wind blows even colder at night. Whoosh. Whoosh. The wind was colder than a politician's promises, but that's another story. And the wind blew and Louis got cold, and Louis huddled up in his little shimmer, his little cloak, but it was so cold up there. But Louis saw a light off in the distance, and he realized it was the campfire of probably another shepherd. And while he waited for the person to go mute, Louis kept on looking at the fire, and he concentrated on the fire, tuning out everything else. Back at the rich man's house, he just knew that the boy would either be coming running in before the night was over, or they would find what was left of his body in the morning. But come morning, Louis appeared at the rich man's house, shivering, cold, but alive. And he said, "No, you should be dead. You should have been here last night. How did you possibly survive?" And Louis said, "I only had my shimmer, I only had my cloak, but off in the distance, I could see the campfire of somebody else in the mountains. And I just concentrated and looked at the campfire and tuned everything else out. And I survived till this morning." And the rich man laughed. "So you are a liar." "No, master, I only had my shimmer." "No, you had the warmth of a campfire." But master, I can only see the campfire." "Yes, and you saw the campfire and you basked in its warmth, and that is how you survived. Well, you and your sister will leave this house, but first I'm going to have a great feast, so you better eat your full, because in the morning you shall be gone." But out of my sight, liar." And so poor Louis went into the kitchen with his sister, who was cooking up a feast. I mean, they were cooking up foods I have no name for because I don't live in Ethiopia, but they cooked up a feast. It was a grand feast, and the aromas filled the banquet hall. Oh, it smelled so good. It smelled so good. And the aromas continued to fill up the banquet hall. And the rich man said, "I don't know what's taking so long with the food, but musicians, play." Put the flute to their mouth, or they just went through the motions. No one played nary note. And at one point, the rich man said, what is going on here?" And at that moment, Louis' sister came out and said, "Did you enjoy your feast, master? And have you enjoyed the music of the musicians?" He said, "There's no food on my plate, and I heard not a note that no one played." He said, "But master, if you could smell the food, then you ate the food. And if you could see the musicians playing, then you heard their music. What foolishness is this? What kind of a man would believe in this kind of foolishness?" The same kind of man that would believe that a little shepherd boy up on a mountain looking at a flame from afar could be kept warm by it. And the master was silent for a moment. And at first, miraculously, he started laughing. I guess even one who is master of his own house can still learn. And as I promised, I will give your brother 4 cows, and I'll give you each a bag of coins. And so Louis and his sister left the rich man's house, and they traveled until they found a place that they could set up a home for themselves. Louis's older sister became known as a very wise person, and people came from near and far and near to ask her advice and to learn from her sage experiences. And as for Louis, well, he took those 4 cows, and before long he had an entire herd of cows and sheep and goats, and he had turned his 2 bags full of money into multiple bags of money. And I'm told that he and his sister lived very well, or some people say in the Western world, they lived happily ever after. And this is my version of Fire on the Mountain. Asante. I think we lost Louis. I enjoyed that story. And because I was telling stories for Louis today, I'm like, I've got to share a lot of things with Louis, and I have more stories I can possibly share today. But I'm gonna do my best. There is a story out of the Bushmen of Namibia. I always get their name incorrect. I got it right? Thank you. There's a country in South America whose name I don't know, I cannot say, but it starts out as, well, it ends with Waga. Never mind, because it comes out wrong if I say it and it sounds like an insult. I don't want to do that. Okay.
Nicaragua.
Yes, but when I say it, it comes out as a slur. And I've been working on it for years, so I always get somebody else to say it for me. Thank you, John Rowe. I told you he's a superhero. So, yes. So, back in the days when the world was young, back in the days before John Rowe, Norman, or Baba C were born, way back in the day, some say there were only 4 days in a week. Man had not made his appearance on the earth, and the first people were animals. Well, back in the day, way back, water was not everywhere. It only appeared in a few places. A well here, a spring there. I got a cough, excuse me. I got all choked up. So in one of these areas, there was a well and there was a baboon. And the baboon took it upon himself to proclaim that well as his own personal property. And he would not allow anyone else to drink from it. In fact, he would say, no, it is my property. You may not drink from it. Go elsewhere. But one day, there was a zebra who was thirsty. Now, back in this time, the zebra's fur was all white. It was whiter than snow, whiter than white rice, whiter than white. And the zebra was thirsty. So he walked up to the well and proceeded to drink. And the baboon saw what he was doing, came running down. No, what are you doing? Stop, that is not your water. That is my water. Only I can drink from this well. Go away, you, go away. But the zebra was tired and thirsty and was not in the mood for the baboons carrying on. Well, next thing you know, the baboon and the zebra were fighting. I mean, they were fighting hard and dirty. The baboon was throwing punches, the zebra was kicking, and they fought and they fought and they fought. And at one point, the zebra kicked the baboon so hard, the baboon went flying through the air and came landing down on 2 rocks on his bum bum. Bam! But the zebra kicked so hard that he propelled himself into the fire. Oh, the baboon had a fire to keep him warm at night. And he fell into the fire, and the fire was burning him, and he jumped out the fire, but there were black streaks of charred wood and where he had been burned all over his body. And at first the zebra was like, what the? And then he said, you know what? This is cool. Oh man, look at this. I have a coat that nobody else has. I have fur that nobody else has. I am so cool. I am so bad. Look at me. Yes. And the zebra trotted off to another part of the jungle. The baboon, alas, he hit that rock so hard, it knocked all the hair off his bum bum. And to this day, the zebra has a shiny behind. And to this day, the zebra has black and white stripes. Asante.
Thank you, Baba C. And I heard South America rather than Southern Africa. So Susan is quite right. It's she's put in the chat Namibia. And I don't think there's a lot of zebras and baboons in Nicaragua, but
no. Excuse me. I was saying that I was having trouble with that name. And then I said, just as like I have trouble with a certain country in South America. I wasn't putting a story in South America. And I have, I see how you do it. If I do only half of the name of the South American country, I'm okay, kind of, sort of. But it's when I try to put it all together. And I've been working on trying to get this thing. It's some type of mental block. I don't know what it is. So I get other people to say the name for me.
Whereas I just miss half what the sentences people say.
You're cool, John Rowe. Nig your rag.
But it's a great story. It's a great story.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I was talking with a dear friend who's becoming even more of a dear friend yesterday. We were supposed to have a brief conversation that lasted several hours, and I'm not complaining. And we found out that even though we may be of different cultures and different backgrounds, we share certain pains and certain jubilations, certain trials and triumphs. So it was a very good conversation. Now, should I mention your name or just leave it at that? Leave it at that? Okay. So we were talking about a Cowtail switch. Wait a minute. Where did my Cowtail switches go? I'll have to use this one today. This is a multicolored Cowtail switch. They usually are only one color. And someone asked me, a youngin asked me, and actually an adult asked me too, where does the Cowtail switch come from? I said, it's made from the tail of a cow. Ew. So I said, you went, ew. Do you eat hamburgers? Yes. I said, well, it comes from the same thing that you get your hamburgers from, but you eat one end and this is the other. Anyhow, this is the Cowtail switch. And if I find my proper Cowtail, I will share it with you in a moment, but I don't see it. Sometimes I think it's a Cowtail switch with feet, but this is a Cowtail switch. And the Cowtail switch in many parts of Africa represents authority and often points out to important people or who is in charge. Now, I don't believe this. I hope you guys can't hear that. Go away. Not you guys, go away. Sorry about that if you heard that. I can't, my phone is so bad right now, I can't turn it off because it might not turn back on. But I put it on silence and evidently it didn't get the memo. Okay, so this is a Liberian tale. I have to be very careful because sometimes I'm gonna go, it's a librarian tale, but that's not what it is. It's from Liberia. And this tale is from a village that overlooked the Cavalli River. And it was a village of Kundi. And in the village of Kundi, they had rice fields and cassava fields. Cassava, it looks sort of like, it's a tubular. It looks sort of like a sweet potato, but it doesn't. But that's the closest comparison I can find. So they had cassava fields and they had rice fields, and the ladies would go out, the women would go out and work in the rice fields and the cassava fields, and the cattle would graze, and would graze on the grasses near the river, and the men and the young men, teenagers, would get up and they would get their hunting gear together, their shields, their spears, or their bows and their arrows, and they would go hunting. And this was the way of life it was. And every day they would go hunting. Now, there was a great hunter by the name of Ogalusa. Pardon my American accent. And Ogalusa was known for his ability to bring down the biggest and fiercest of game. And one day he went out hunting, but at the end of the day, he did not come back. Now, Ogalusa had many children, many children. How many is up for discussion even to today, but he didn't come back. At some point, someone said, where's father? Don't know. He went hunting, hadn't seen him. Another day went by and someone said, where's Ogalusa? Don't know. He went hunting, hasn't come back. And after a while, people stopped inquiring about Ogalusa. Well, while Ogalusa was gone, his wife gave birth to another child named Puli. And when Puli was born, the first words out of his mouth were, where is my father? People in the village stopped for a moment because they realized they hadn't spoken of Ogalusa in quite some time. Where is my father? And so Puli's older brothers said, some of Puli's old brothers said, he went hunting, but he never came back. We must go look for him. And so they gathered their gear, their hunting gear, their shields, their spears, the things that they needed for hunting, and they went looking for their father. And they looked, and they looked, and they looked, and they found his trail, and they started following, but then they lost his trail. And they looked, and they looked, And they looked and they found his trail and they started following his trail. But once again, they lost his trail. So they looked and they looked and they looked and they found his trail and they followed the trail. And by the time they got to the end of the trail, there they saw the bones of their father, his rusted spear and shield. And one son said, "Ah, our father has come to an untimely end. But I know how to put the bones of a body back together again." And so he reassembled the bones until they constructed the bones of their father. And another son said, "I know how to give the bones muscle and flesh." And so that son began to work on the bones and he put in muscles and flesh. And another son said, "I know how to put blood into the body." And so this son put blood into the body. And another son said, "I know how to give him the breath of life." And he breathed into the body and the body began to breathe. And Ogalusa, their father, sat up. And their son says, "Father has returned." And so all together they went back to the village. The village saw Ogalusa and his sons, and they had a mighty feast. In fact, Ogalusa actually went right back out and hunted and got himself some great game and came back, and they had a mighty feast. There was eating, there was drinking, both adult and non-adult beverages, and there was drumming and music. Oh, it was a grand time, the Kijiji in the village. After a while, Ogalusa sat by himself and thought about what had transpired. And he began to take a cowtail and he began to work it into a cowtail switch, which he decorated and which he ornated. And he took the cowtail switch and it became a thing of wonder and beauty. And wherever he went, he would take the cowtail switch. Now, some people will tell you the cowtail switch is used to keep the flies away, and that may be true, but he took it with him. And wherever Ogalusa and the cowtail switch were, people would gather around, and people actually wanted the cowtail switch. They offered Ogalusa money, they offered him food, they offered him to build a new compound, but he would not part with the switch. And at special ceremonies and important ceremonies, he would take the switch with him. And it soon became a symbol of authority and importance. For Ogalusa was well respected in the village, and in many ways, he was considered their leader. But then one day, when there was all this arguing going on about buying the switch, about being given the switch, Ogalusa said, "I will give this switch to the son that did the most to bring me back." So the son who knew how to put bones together said, "Well, then I get it. I put the bones together, and if I had not put the bones back together, you would not be with us, Father." "Oh, you may have put the bones together," said another son, "but I'm the one that put in the flesh, the muscles, and the sinew. So without that, the skeleton would have just been a bag of bones." "Oh, you may have done that, but I'm the one that put the blood in the bones and in the flesh so that the body could move." "Well, you may have done that, but I'm the one that breathed in the breath of life, so I deserve the switch." And they kept arguing among themselves until Ogalusa said, "Stop, enough. I have made a decision. The cowtail switch will go to Puli. For Puli, when he was born, said, 'Where is my father?' which set in motion for the rest of you to come find me and do the deeds that you did. Puli will inherit the cowtail switch." Now, this story has many, 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 many different lessons that can be taught. But there's an old saying that a man never dies if he's remembered. Asante. I'm having fun. I'm having more fun than should be allowed by law. All right. So I need to catch a little breather. If anyone wants to make a comment about the stories I've told, that's not This is a non-adult beverage. So if anyone has a comment they want to make now, I'd be glad to hear it. And everybody is enthralled. Okay. So let me pull out my list of stories I'm going to go over.
Loving the stories so far. There you go. I'll say something. I'm really enjoying it.
Thank you.
And I also want to say something too.
Are you in the car, Louis?
Pardon?
Are you in the car?
I am.
Oh, okay, because it's so dark. I thought we had lost you.
No,
Okay.
because I know you can see me. And
Yes.
I can see me.
Okay.
But because I'm in dark, because it's dark outside. And that's why you know my name and see me.
Yeah, I can see you. I keep forgetting that for most of you, it's now dark. On my side, it's barely 1:30 in the afternoon. So this is a short story, and I think that
Louis wanted to say something.
Go ahead, Louis.
Yes, I'd like you a comment on the question on the chat for you, Babsy.
Okay, I see he says
There's
going
a
to.
question on the comment.
I'm looking now. I see it says you're going swimming.
Yes, I am now. And my mum said to me, your stories is amazing. Anyway, my mum said that.
I tell your mom I said thank you. Tell her I said asante sana. That means thank you very much in Swahili.
Sibu Daito, you're welcome.
All right. And do you enjoy the stories, Louis?
Actually, yes, I am. I'm looking at 10. I got 10, 100, 100, 1,000. I got 1,000.
Louis,
Yes,
you know what?
I love your stories.
Oh, thank you, Louis. And I love you loving my stories.
And I heard the first one about me as well. You say about I've got a sister, but I have it away.
No, but in the story, you had a sister.
Ah.
That's what I say in the story. Because see, his name isn't Louis.
Real,
but okay. But that's all right. You know, but in the story, I changed the character's name, the boy's name, to Louis. I know about 10 different versions of the story, and they have 10 different names. But I decided to name him Louis today. All right, Louis, I got a very short story that I think you might enjoy, and everybody else will enjoy as well. And this is called A Sly Cat. And this story is from Ghana.
Oh my goodness.
I love Louis. All right, Louis, so I'm gonna tell this story. I want you to listen. Now, again, long before John Rowe or Mike Factory, I'm pardon if I mispronounce your name, long before Norman or Babasi was born, was when this story took place. You see, a long time ago, there was a cat that used to be very good at catching mice. In fact, in some parts of the world, he would be called a mouser. Well, this cat could catch mice like no other cat around. And in the house that he protected, he just caught him. And they were afraid of him. They were afraid of the cat. Well, as time goes on, the cat got older and not quite as swift. And it was becoming more and more difficult for him to catch the mice. And the mice were growing less and less afraid of him. So one day the cat had an idea. And this is what he did. One day the cat was walking and he keeled over and he played dead. And the mice were looking because what just happened? Did he just, I think the mouse is dead. The mouse is dead? Ding dong, the mouse is dead. Oh, that's another story. I think the mouse is dead. And so they began to gather around him and the cat didn't move. Not the mouse is dead, the cat is dead. The cat didn't move. Some of them kind of nudged him. The cat didn't move. One pulled on his tail, never pull on a cat's tail. The cat didn't move. And they began to have a little party, and they were dancing and singing around the cat. And then one mouse jumped up on the cat and began to dance on his belly. And he got really, really bold, and he walked up on the cat and began to dance on his face. And when he danced on the cat's face, the cat opened his mouth. The mouse was gone. The other mice realized what was happening. Unfortunately, they didn't all get away, but most of them did. But to this day, mice don't trust cats. And there's an old saying that says, even when a cat's on his back, don't trust him. And that is the tale from Ghana.
Whoa!
You know, Louis should get a TV show.
I will.
He is such a great encourager. What do you call people that not the pom-pom people, the other ones, the ones that encourage the teams to victory? What do you call them? Unmute for a moment, Susan, and tell me.
There we go. Hi, Baba. See, it's a cheerleader. Ooh,
Thank you. I couldn't think of that for anything. Cheerleader. You know, my mind is in a non-Western set right now, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know these words. But anyhow, cheerleader, right? You are. Louis is a great cheerleader, and he's, you know, yes, anyone that's in his corner is going to do well because he's a great cheerleader. You know. Thank you, Susan.
I will.
So this story is a Zulu story. And this story is about why the cheetah's cheeks are stained. And if you see a cheetah, it seems to have like little tear stains coming down from around his eyes. And once again, this story took place a long time ago, but you've gathered that most of my stories do. So there was a very wicked and very lazy hunter. In fact, he was so lazy, I won't give him a name. Now, he wanted the benefits from hunting, but he was too lazy to actually hunt himself. And he often sat under a big old tree trying to figure out ways of hunting without actually having to do the work himself. Well, not far from where he sat under the big old tree, there was a cheetah who had 3 cubs. She took very good care of her cubs because, well, never get between a cheetah and her cubs. And so one day she went hunting because she had to feed her cubs. And she brought down an ibex. I think I got the right animal. It's a deer-like animal. And she was in the process of bringing it back to her cubs. But the wicked, lazy hunter got wind of the fact that she was hunting and that she had cubs not too far. So he thought to himself, you know, I could probably take one of those cubs and teach it to hunt and bring the game back to me so I don't have to go hunting. So while the cheetah was struggling to bring back the ibex she had brought down, he sneaked into her den and he couldn't figure out which one to take. So he said, you know what, I'll just take all 3. 3 trained cheetahs is better than 1. And he sneaked out and he took the cheetahs back to the big old tree where he was residing. When Mother Cheetah came back with food for her cubs, she saw her children were gone. And this saddened her because she knew other animals hunted those that hunted. And she cried, and she cried, and she cried, and she cried, and she cried because she was so sad. They were her cubs, they were her babies, and they were gone. Well, there was a wise old man in the village who knew and understood the ways of animals, and animals would not attack him. And he was on a walk and he heard the cheetah crying. And so he stopped her den and he asked her what was wrong. And she said, while I was out hunting food for my babies, something came and took them away. And she started crying again. And the rain from her eyes kept staining her fur and she kept on crying. And the wise old man said, I'll look into this for you. I make no promises, but I'll look into this for you. And so the wise old man began to follow a trail that the mother cheetah had overlooked. And he followed the trail back to the great big tree where the very lazy and very wicked hunter lived. And he saw that he had the 3 cheetahs and was trying to train them to hunt. Now, this reminds me that from when I taught in schools, I often had students that spent far more energy trying to get out of an assignment than the energy required to do the assignment. Now, if he was so lazy he didn't want to go hunting, where was he going to find the energy to train 3 cheetahs to hunt for him? Just let that ferment in the back of your mind. And when the old wise man saw the lazy hunter with the 3 cheetahs, he decided this would not stand. And he took the 3 cheetahs, the 3 cubs, because the hunter was too lazy to try to fight a wise man. And the wise man was much respected in the community. That would only bode for him more trouble. So he took the 3 cheetahs back to the mother cheetah, and she was so happy. Now she was crying with joy. But all her tears had stained the fur in front of her eyes. To this day, she still has stains in front of her eyes, as does her descendants, her children's children, her children's children's children, and her children's children's children. But the story doesn't end there. The wise old man went back to the village and told them what the lazy hunter had done. There are many punishments they could have bestowed upon him, but they banished him from the Kijiji. They banished him from the village, and his name was stricken, never to be spoken of again, which is why I didn't give him a name in this story. Now, the main lesson of the story, well, you know what? What do you think the main lesson in this story is? I gave you a hint, but what do you think? Unmute yourselves and share, please. Don't everyone unmute at once. Go ahead, Mike.